If you have wonderful partners, then you can sometimes shock the world and achieve some outsized gains. Ultimately, in everything that we do, it's all about the people. Like, this is the oil. If you look at all of the long-term plans of the Gulf, they're quite extensive in their scope, but they all have one thing in common, which is to build a knowledge economy. And that's what we're here to do. We're just scratching the surface of what's possible, and I can't wait to see what comes next.
There are people saying, especially the ones who didn't visit or didn't live here in Dubai, that Dubai is no more. But that couldn't be further than truth, because we who live here feel that change and reinvention of itself is the constant, and the change is always happening. In today's episodes, we'll deep dive into government's efforts and the possibilities that arise from there in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, and throughout all Middle East. As our guest, Sam Blatteis, said, this is still the hidden gem of world's economy. But before we deep dive into a conversation with our guest about this, make sure to subscribe or follow us on social media and wait for a new episode of the Change Officer podcast, Comms and Media, every Wednesday, high noon. So Sam, thank you very much for being in the Change Officer podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We usually have the first question always the same, but with you, I think it should be a little bit different. The question we usually ask is, when somebody tells you the change, what is the first thing you think about? But for you, since you, I would say, are in the business of the change, you are changing some perspectives of the biggest companies in the world, biggest innovators in the world about a specific market. I would ask you, what has changed in this market recently, and what is changing for your clients and the potential clients in the market recently?
Simply put, we've seen the region go from single-digit internet penetration in the year 2000 to skyrocketing internet usage to the tune of, for instance, in Saudi Arabia, there's now a user base larger than the whole state of Texas. The region's overall user base at over 200 million people is larger than the whole population of Russia, a BRIC country. While at the same time, we've seen 87 million smartphones imported into the region in the last year alone. That's more than went to UK and France combined. This rich, fertile ground, combined with the idea that in China and Europe and the States, regulators are becoming more sophisticated, becoming more muscular toward tech companies, has objectively expanded incentives for high-tech companies to look to less regulated markets. And the Middle East is frankly a green field. If you look at the geometry of growing social media demand and the youth bulging expanding demographic, there's simply a universe of potential here. And for this reason, in the last couple of years, we've seen tech companies to the tune of dozens, if not more, brand name, publicly traded companies raise their flag and expand their physical presence in the Gulf and shift away from a buyer-seller relationship with the region to one of two strategic partners.
You were working in Google with government, in the government relations and public policies in all Gulf countries. And I think you couldn't have a better perspective on the region and the potentials of the region. And still you are here, and still you're working kind of the same thing. So you think that there is a big future there and a big potential, as you just said?
The roles are certainly a bit different. First of all, I'd say that we're just scratching the surface of what's possible, and I can't wait to see what comes next. Second, I would say that there are significant untapped opportunities, but also quite a lot of challenges as well. To get to the heart of the matter, you have the rise of cybercrime and political speech and online fraud have brought into sharp focus for policymakers that offline laws and legislation developed decades ago have become simply inadequate in the post-online world. So you're seeing tectonic plates move beneath your feet of new legislation come forward. Just as any business that's in the offline analog world has to get registered and get a license, increasingly tech companies are starting to see that they're going to have to as well. And I'd say a key thing is just that this place is kind of like a hidden gem because you can't automatically see it, the Middle East, from Silicon Valley always, because often Europe is overseeing the Middle East. But once you physically come here, then people begin to see the vast untapped potential.
Who are the companies that you are catering to and helping emerge or start or expand on this market?
Tech companies that are focused on, interested in growing their business in the Middle East, as well as firms with challenges here. Maybe they've been legitimate companies that are publicly traded, that want to do things in the proper way, that have been banned here. Maybe there's been a breakdown in communication. Companies also that might be comfortable in Dubai, but they actually have regional business plans. And so they want to expand into 3 Arab capitals that their business plans fundamentally depend on, but that they have not themselves lived or worked yet, of Abu Dhabi, Riyadh. The third capital kind of depends between Cairo and sometimes another GCC capital.
Yeah, the thing is, living in Dubai for so long, we always see Dubai reinvent itself throughout the years. And I think that countries in the region are really following that trend. And as you said, like opening of Saudi Arabia in the past few years, and Qatar having this World Cup thing, and which is very big, not only for Qatar, but for the region, definitely, and so on. And but what are the industries that you think will have the success in the region, could have success now or in the near future? What are the industries that you are catering to?
There is significant untapped potential in the B2C market, specifically with the rise of mobile gaming, the dating app economy, the social networking arena. Clubhouse is the tip of the iceberg. There's also a range of companies that are beginning to move into this space, including established heavyweights as well, from Instagram to certain new parts of Twitter and so forth. There's also, I'd say, a great focus on companies that can make the social media ecosystem more representative of the indigenous people from this region. There's a stunning opportunity, I think, to develop Arabic content that speaks to people not just here, but here as well. Specifically, if you have right now about 7% of the earth speaks Arabic, but only 1% to 2% of the world's internet content's in Arabic, that's a significant market opportunity. When we see content delivered in local dialects for locals by locals, then actually usage and consumption just catapult and skyrocket.
Yeah, we tend to talk a little bit in this podcast about the communication and media, and that's my question basically. Do you think that the future of this region is communication in Arabic, or you think it's bilingual, or you think it should be more English-wise orientated? There's the question. That's not the. What is your opinion?
There's significant, a lot less competition and a lot more demand for content that speaks to people in their own dialect. That I think tech companies are slowly waking up to. That they need to improve. Both in business terms and cultural terms. The English-based content is not going to have the same resonance, the same customer loyalty that a local one can. And we've seen that time and again.
So this is what we usually say, it's a globalization through localization.
The number of tech companies first came in with their English generic versions from their headquarters. And then over time, as they become more sophisticated, understand the local market, then they can find the right talent to develop more customized, focused content.
This is what our company is based on, not localizing the content, but creating original local content for the companies in the most efficient way. Like if you're working for Microsoft is creating a lot of content from Redmond or Seattle, and so on. But on localized markets like Dubai, like Singapore, you have to create relevant content for the region, and it has to be at least bilingual, but tackling the topics of the region or in the native language, whatever the country you're in, depending on the size of not depending on the size. It has to be a relevant content on each and every site. One of the things that is there for sure by the consumption per capita, this region is amazing when it comes to the social media, especially Saudi Arabia, which is not developed in any media content creation way other than YouTube or Instagram and so on. Is it a good starting point for the things that you mentioned, gaming, dating apps, and social media platforms to build up on that?
There is enormous talent in Saudi Arabia today, and locals will always be able to understand their culture quicker and deeper. There is a really powerful business case there that a number of global tech companies are now backing up with actions, with budgets, authorities, headcount to deliver on. I mean, in terms of budgets, for instance, you saw Netflix sign a significant content deal in Saudi Arabia with C3, Telfaz 11. Yeah. You've also seen a number of hiring sprees begin from Amazon in Saudi Arabia to Apple in Saudi Arabia to others. Companies are starting to just grapple with the reality that, look, we can stay in the ivory tower and only stay in countries that maybe have the same, maybe certain origin story values that we'd only probably stay in Sweden. If we want to be global companies, that means we're going to have to adapt and adjust and realize this is a contact sport. And the reason is because Wall Street does not reward past performance. They're making market valuations based on anticipated future earnings. And that future growth for a lot of global tech companies increasingly turns on access in emerging growth markets. And to what extent tech companies can protect and expand their position there, rather than saturated markets like some parts of the States or slower growth markets, possibly in Europe. And that's what I'd say there.
No, that's for sure the thing. And we are talking about advantages and how Dubai reinvents itself, and the region is now really blooming and as you said, enormous hidden gem that is hiding behind that. But what are the challenges of this market? What advices would you have for the companies thinking about expanding to Middle East?
A number of tech companies think that they are in the IT business, but they're not. They're in the relationship business. And building up their business in the region, the principal challenges may not always be technical. It's mostly addressed eyeball to eyeball like this. And I think having a more inclusive, disciplined approach toward focusing on the centers of gravity in the region, meaning stop maybe trying to be everything to every country. Instead of focusing on all 22, 23 countries in the region, depending on how you count it, we've often advised have a laser focused, but the point is that if we first get the two largest Arab economies right, our business presence and have a solid foundation there, then it can cascade and have spillover effects in a range of ways. So that's one thing I think is we tell people to drop the nice to have activities in a lot of different countries and aim high, work backward. Frankly, changing their attitude from one of kind of being a turtle. Many tech companies, the business leads, rightfully so, they will build graphs and business plans that will go up and to the right. And they will act as though almost like turtles pretending to hide under my shell to hope that nobody notices me. There's no substitute for talking directly to the folks in the halls of power. We advise companies to understand that government, it's not just government. They are the courts, the media, the biggest spenders, all rolled into one. And at the end of the day, this is their house. And how do you treat someone when you go into their house? Well, you say hello and you pay your respects.
When in Rome.
And therefore, we explain to folks that, look, there's often not a connection between the quality of one's product or the cost of one's product in predicting which company wins. People love their brands here. So those are a few things to keep in mind, that this is sometimes an anecdotal society, and a lot of times you don't have to try to be all things to all people. Burning so much money on marketing and on PR and advertising may not lead to the results that you need. A lot of it's about putting in the time and the relationships, specifically almost thinking of it like the way you would approach a bank account. Like you deposit, you do something not for yourself, but try to help others in the community. It's almost like depositing a little bit in a bank account. You do that again, you do it again. The first time, maybe you're seen as almost, people might wonder if you're self-interested, why you're doing it. But over time, if you do that 10 to 15 times, people might say, oh, actually, this person maybe is a good guy.
I think that I would say recent history has to do a lot with it, because when this region started booming, there are a lot of people coming in and just for taking money, and then that this is something that become wider opinion. But then there is one saying that I heard in this region, and that is, you cannot sell goods out of the plane. Meaning, you cannot just pack yourself. Come to the Dubai, or anywhere in the region, with a suitcase and like a traveling salesman, this is no. You have to spend time.
Play the long game.
I remember when I was starting a business, everybody was saying, you have to have a local company. Doesn't matter who you are, you have to have a local presence. They really like it, and they really appreciate it, because especially, when I say, my family is here. So you're not just someone who came to asking for some, a profit and run away. That's the in the essence of the region.
I think a lot of companies are beginning to realize that it's hard to do business with this region by remote control.
Yeah.
And they're starting to see, I think, that what you described is so essential. Specifically, also, the timing is so significant because you have a great deal of, the region is kind of bifurcating in certain ways. It's like becoming a two-level game, the economy. On the surface, you read headlines about the economies contracting in this country or that one. And underneath, there are stunning epicenters of growth in the tech and digital worlds. We think actually that tech companies are seeing how their business is actually not as niche as it might seem on the surface. In fact, the tech sector is no longer, or their businesses are no longer a vertical of the economies here. They're horizontal enablers of every part of the economies here, from transportation to education. Yeah. And frankly, the coronavirus has kind of caused significant setbacks and challenges for the offline analog world. And catapulted multiple years into the future, the digital and cyber world. The top 5 American tech companies have north of $500 billion in cash on their balance sheets. I would argue that many tech companies, not most, are actually even on a hiring spree right now throughout the Middle East, in stunning contrast to the macro numbers you see on the surface, which may often speak to some of the older analog industries. And so countries fundamentally have a question they face, which is, do we want to protect the past from the future or the future from the past? As
you said, global trend, which reflects also on the Middle East, but with all specificities. And I think that this region is kind of early adopter, I would say. Like living in a country where everything is the tallest, the biggest, the fastest, Guinness Book of Records have amazing office here, because everybody is pushing towards that. So do you think this is also a specific thing to this region?
Well, 2 things. One is, yes, this city was practically, it's almost custom tailored to be an outstanding set of assets for Instagram pictures. The amount of Instagrammable sites in the center are amazing. Second, honestly, Dubai is 20 to 30 years into the future of their neighbors to their east in Iran, or their west, or their south. I think part of the equation is that you have the rise of Generation Y leaders increasingly taking the reins of the economies in the next generation of princes in Dubai and Abu Dhabi, and in many parts of the GCC are actually quite inspiring, tech savvy, and have a very different approach, I think, than previous generations, which is also quite powerful for tech companies. Partnerships can be some of the most essential kind of force multipliers of a business. If you have the wrong partners but a great idea, something's not going to get delivered, and vice versa. You can have an average idea, but if you have wonderful partners, then you can sometimes shock the world and achieve some outsized gains.
No, we can see both sides here. You're working with the biggest tech companies, social media, dating apps, gaming industry leaders. But I'm sure that you have some insight, because quite a few people of watching this podcast are the people in startups and startups ecosystem. Is there anything that you would like to bring up for them, some kind of an advice on how they can leverage on what you said about the big companies and the government's relations and the region itself?
Okay. Yeah, a few things. One is that government can be your most powerful force multiplier. They can, when on your side, they can be quite helpful in opening up seemingly uncompetitive markets. They can introduce or create the way for new market entrants when incumbents might seem to have a lock in a certain area. Governments can, frankly, if you want to alleviate all or most of the PR risk and the legal risk in a lot of countries in the region, because of a lack of independent courts and a lack of independent investigative journalism necessarily, governments are a really impressive way to kind of alleviate a lot of those concerns and clear the path. And I would say that essentially another really important thing is that you can have an outsized impact in dealing with government here and opening markets that most foreign startups could never have in most other regions of the world. The idea that I helped contribute to the tech section of Vision 2030 as a foreigner, the idea that I got to contribute to writing the previous Saudi national trade strategy. These things, if I was in Germany, a foreign citizen would never be allowed to do this. Probably the same in the States. So one thing that's actually kind of neat is that with government, they want to import brains and they want to listen to different views and get this right.
And they're creating ecosystem. They're creating ecosystem for us.
Yeah. And also, it's besides the government can be some of the largest customers for your companies. They are anyway. I think government is something that you want to find the right partners. There are a few islands of efficiency. Yeah. There are a lot of 1950s creaky old style bureaucracies, but there are certainly, when you find the right partners, they can make all the difference in the world. I'd say other key feedback, which is similar, which is related, is ultimately in everything that we do, it's all about the people. Like, this is the oil, and be slow in onboarding people, fast in firing people, yeah, I mean, you can have a mediocre idea, and if you have world-class people, you can still achieve world-class results, and vice versa.
So it's amazing what you said, like fast hiring, faster firing.
Well, I'm saying maybe even be intentional and inclusive and disciplined on the hiring side, slow on hiring and fast on firing, because you want to make sure you got the right people. If you have the right, I mean, that's arguably the most important.
But they say you have to be the fastest in promoting people. Like, if you see the talent and everything, you need to, slow hiring, fast firing, and even faster promoting people within the company that can make difference. That's the something that people have to look into. Sam, thank you very much. Did we cover everything? Because I think with every question there is a new book we could open and talk about your company, your relations, and the Middle East. Is there anything that we didn't cover? Maybe we should tap into.
Two topics. Just one is that there's a lot more potential for companies to open markets here than they probably could in other parts of the world. I think there's a misunderstanding sometimes of people outside the Middle East or people that don't have a lot of experience dealing with government that the government's here, and I'm not talking politics. I'm just talking about it from a pragmatic perspective, from a tech company perspective, that the government's here. Things can happen. You can make changes and have your voice heard, and a no once does not mean a no forever. So, we've unblocked, we've cooperated in the proper way to help unblock over a dozen apps in the region, and help companies go from zero revenue and zero users to skyrocketing growth. I think that's one key. Also, just the government. It's the ones in the Gulf are not something to be afraid of. They are very reasonable people at the top. I'll give you one short metaphor in 20 seconds if you want, which is, there's this idea about proximity to power. I don't know if you heard about this, but the further away we get from power, the more distorted or muscular the message can get. So if you go into a Diwan or a Majlis of one of the leaders in the region, and someone says, gee, I'd sure like the trash picked up off the street. Fast forward to tape, 2 days later, you're going to have two bureaucrats duplicating each other's efforts, practically falling on their sword, regulators trying to pick the trash up off the street. In contrast, or another example, a ruler might see a website and say, that's funny, what was he thinking? And then the regulator will call the tech company and say, we're very offended. How could you do X, Y, Z? But when you talk to the leaders, they're actually really futuristic, forward-leaning, reasonable people when it comes to trying to find a balance and make your tech. As long as you're here for business, they actually want to be very reasonable and cooperative in a way that we haven't seen with many parts of the world. there's a certain approach here that's quite really refreshing. I mean, part of that might be because this country, it's kind of insane. This, there's over 200 nationalities here. There's you have over, the country's younger than Matt Damon, but I'll leave you with one 20-second anecdote, and then we'll finish up.
Please.
No.
One time, we don't have to finish. There is no limit.
One senior royal in Abu Dhabi once told me when I lived there that you want to understand why the tech sector matters to us, you got to look at our history. Rewind the tape to the first half of the 20th century when our economy was also based on a one-product export-led growth economy in the form of pearls.
Pearls, yeah.
And because of an innovation half a world away, with the rise of cultured pearls in Japan, our economy was rendered obsolete almost overnight. And we vowed to never let that happen again. This is not, the building a knowledge economy is not PR for them.
They want to stay relevant.
Because they realize that for the first time, that the amount of time it's going to take for, Tesla and electric vehicles to kind of make a permanent dent in long-term oil demand is now shorter than the time it'll take for some places in the region to alleviate their critical dependence on oil. What I'm saying is that if you look at all of the long-term plans of the Gulf, Vision 2030 here in Abu Dhabi, or the Vision 2071 or Vision 2030 in South, they're quite extensive in their scope, but they all have one thing in common, which is to build a knowledge economy. And that's what we're here to do. That's what we're all here to do. So I hope you enjoyed opening day together.
No. I think this is the amazing ending of this podcast, but the story continues because this is the story of the change. And this is the story of never-ending change, giving the example not only to us who are living here, but also for people all around the world that is possible, what is possible, how it is possible. I would say in some countries, government would need you to pay someone like you and me to talk positive about it. But we are living here and we sense the power of that movement, the power of that change, and the possibilities that arise from there.
Yeah.
So I would like to just emphasize once more, and I think with these pearls and everything, we came back to the phrase of hidden gem that this market is. And with the MENA Catalyst, of course, much easier to infiltrate or expand or to grow and navigate on this market.
Thank you.
Sam, thank you very, very much. This is really eye-opening. I would like to have a coffee with you very soon and discuss a lot of things because, as I said, after every question and after every answer you had, we opened the new book.
Our pleasure.
Thank you very much.
Our pleasure. Thank you very much.